Sure, we'll get it on tape. Let me ask you a couple of questions. A couple of them I know the answers to the tape anyhow.
All right.
You started at WXYZ.
Right.
When?
No.
Go back before.
Experience?
Yeah, go back before that.
Or you want the beginning of me in radio in particular?
Yeah.
Okay. This is how I got into radio, the great medium. I won a spelling bee contest for the Wayne County area for the state of Michigan. And at the same time, almost simultaneously, I won an English essay contest at my school. And the winners of the spelling bee contest simultaneously were allowed to be interviewed at WWJ in Detroit, the world's first radio station. There's a guy who ran a show called produced a show, Jim Skimmerhorn. Ran a show, a 50-minute kids show on Saturday mornings at 11:30 or 45. And he asked me, I had my mother with me shortly before she died, and if I would like to do a part in the Secretary Hawkins Fair and Square Club. You remember Jim Fletcher that was down here? Jimmy was my dearest friend in those days and still is. And Jim was playing the part of Secretary Hawkins. And I was asked to play a part of Scrub Tory. He was a little kid and he had an English accent, which I still had because I was just over from England a couple of years. And we did that for about, 6 months, I guess. This was in 1932, mind you. Did that for 6 months or so, and the show went off the air. And Jimmy and I were out one Saturday afternoon. We picked up the Detroit Free Press and read an ad in there which wanted kids to audition for the part of Dan Reed. Jim Jewell, director. The show had been on the air maybe 30 days, a month. We went to WXYZ and Mr. Jewell interviewed us and auditioned us from an old Lone Ranger script. That had been a new one, that Fran Stryker had just written the part of Dan Reed, but it was projected that they would use, when they found the right kid, the script when it would go on the air. Well, I won the audition. There were only 3 kids that I had auditioned for it. A kid called Sam Ziff. And from there on, I was on the show. I can't really tell you, Terry, how many times, but I did it off and on. I was always the Dan Reed in the character version, right through until 1935, when my voice changed, and I went from that high child's range to a much lower tone, lower register. And so I was put into the sound effect department, and still did juveniles and did kids' parts and one thing and another, but nothing that had any similarity to Dan. And I never went back to it. They had a kid called Milt Guion who came in and did the part for a year or so, and he died, and another kid took over. Meantime, I was doing sound effects and was doing various and sundry parts until 1941, when the war broke out. And after Pearl Harbor, they took Raymond Hayashitoyo, who played Kato in the Green Hornet, and he was a real Jap, and he was a spy. Nobody knew that. His brother George worked for Ford Motor Company as a foreman. He also was a spy. He was sending secrets to an envoy back to Japan. Raymond, I often wondered why, because he lived in the same apartment building I did, the Orrington Apartments at 459 Prentice, behind Convention Hall, and about 6 or 7 blocks away from the Maccabees building, where the original shows originated and were broadcast from. Raymond, when I would walk home with him on occasion, and he owned, incidentally, a sukiyaki place, Japanese sukiyaki. Fine restaurant, good. And he invited a group of the old Lone Ranger actors over to his apartment one night. His wife was going to cook us a sukiyaki dinner, and we were all thrilled. But that particular night, and others before it, I was walking home with him, and he would... Do you remember Lucky Strike Green has gone to war?
During the war, yeah.
They took the tinfoil, heavy tinfoil, not like it is today. And I asked him this particular night, I said, Raymond, why, what do you do with that tinfoil and the empty cigarette packages that you pick up out of the gutter off the street? I show you when we get to my apartment. So when we got there, after dinner, he says, come here, nobody else. Now, this man hated America, and he'd never professed it before to me, or I don't think anybody else. And he says, come here in the bedroom. So we go in the bedroom, and here on the dresser is a box about that big, Terry, wooden box, that long, that wide, about that high. Takes the lid off. And I looked, I was amazed. What the hell is he doing with these? He had taken originally he rolled them into balls, tight balls, then he apparently took a hammer or whatever he used, and he squished them or squashed them down into little squares so they fit perfectly. Three more on top of that, filling the box. Now what he was doing with those, he was mailing them back to Japan, and they were used by the Japanese forces against us. They came back to us in bullets, or some form of warfare. In other words, they came back to kill Americans. I said, I don't believe this, Raymond. You damn imperialist. We go to war soon, you see. When we go to war, Japan win. This was what he was. Well, right after Pearl Harbor, 2 days after, Pearl Harbor was on a Sunday. I was with Mike Wallace that Sunday morning, and his wife of then, Cappy. Chris Wallace was not born then. He was born in Chicago, here, or in Chicago rather, 2 years later. And they took Raymond and his brother George and his wife, he had no more family than I know of here, there, and put them in an internment camp, a Japanese internment camp, most of them coming from the West Coast, gardeners and what have you. And to this day, I don't think anybody, I don't anyway, know whatever happened to them. I truly believe that he was killed. Murdered, a lot of them were. That's common knowledge anymore. I don't think those people, like the good Japanese Samaritans from the West Coast, were killed by our government, the CIA, whatever it might be. But I just have a strange, strong feeling that that is what happened to Ray and his wife. However, I am of a firm belief, Terry, that the man deserved everything he got. If he hated America and America was giving him his living, and we were dying because of a small war effort that he conceived himself and did, destroying Americans, he deserved to die. And I'm a very emotional man, but I cannot be on his side for something like this. I couldn't then, I wouldn't now if it were happening today.
How was that handled at the station? At some point, he had to have left the show.
He left the show right after Pearl Harbor. The Green Hornet went on Tuesday night. Pearl Harbor was Monday. He was not on the show Monday. He went to internment camp that same week. So.
Now, going back, you mentioned originally 3 kids tried out for Dan Reed.
Yeah.
Do you remember the other 2 names?
Yeah, Jim Fletcher and Bobby Morrison.
Bobby Morrison.
Bobby Morrison, yeah. They were all kids on that Secretary Hawkins Fair and Square Club.
Now, who was the announcer on the show at that time?
Harry Golder.
Okay, and now you came in at the time that John Stinius was doing a show.
John Stinius was the first.
Right.
No, there were other Jack Deeds and people. I don't remember Jack Deeds.
Well,
he was on a show. He was on once.
Yeah.
Then came George Seaton, who was excellent. Then came Earl Grosser, and then came Brace Beamer, and that was it.
Okay, now, from what I've been able to determine through my research on it, check me if I'm wrong, I thought it started out with George Stinius, later to be George Seaton.
No.
For a while, for like 2 months, 3 months, and then it was a one-time shot on Deeds, Jack Deeds, and we're not
Jack
really.
Deeds was number one.
Well, he was the first.
I'm so sure about that. I could be wrong too, Terry.
Okay, and then my understanding was he was so intimidated by
George.
Jewel.
Oh,
That
Jewel was a task.
he only made one show and was somewhat well fortified the next appearance. Jewel relieved him just prior to going on the air, and Jewel did one show, and that's when Graja was brought in the following broadcast.
You're right. He was a law student at University of Detroit.
Right. Didn't he date Lee Allman at the time? Or she knew of him or something like that,
Yeah.
didn't it?
Not that I know of. I'm pretty sure he didn't.
Okay.
Funny story about Earl. He was a tightwad. He was a real tightwad. Beer cost 10 cents a glass in those days. He used to carry a roll of dimes with him in his pocket. He'd go in the alcove bar after we got through at 8 o'clock at night, have a beer in between shows, and we got off the air at 11 o'clock after the 10:30 show going out to West Coast. He never bought anybody a drink, and no one ever bought him a drink. No way. But the very last night, the night that he was killed in February of 1941, we had it was our bowling night, so we bowled in between shows. See? Mm-hmm. And afterwards, we had a few drinks together, and we had invited to the London Chop House, one of the world's finest restaurants, by a guy called Hy Vogel, who is still alive, and was a caricaturist. His caricatures are all over famous people. Barbra Streisand, John Wayne, you name it. On the walls, adorning the walls of the London Chop House, and they wanted Earl's picture up there. I was with him until the bar closed at 2:30. And Les Gruber, who owned the Chop House, and dear guy. And I said goodnight to Earl when he got his car out in front. He was driving a brand new 1941 Packard. That's why I'll never forget it. With a great grill and a chrome grill in the front. Magnificent car. And he got exactly, I may be wrong on this, but I know he wasn't less than, because I saw the spot later on. I saw the wreck itself. He apparently, according to all conjecture, fell asleep at the wheel, and there was a big Fruhoff trailer truck was parked off the side of the road, off the pavement. 2 wheels anyway. The driver had his flares out and back. Apparently he had taken a nap at the wheel also, and Earl ran into that going 40 or 50 miles an hour and was decapitated. The car, when I saw it the next day, it had sheared. It just went over the it was weird. The car went right directly under the tail end of the truck and sheared the hood right off. Now, if it had been any other kind of a truck, he might have lived to this day. Who knows? He was a fine man.
Now, he was married at the time with, about a 1-year-old daughter?
Yes, as I recall, a 1-year-old or less.
What's remember his wife's name or daughter's name?
I think it was Belle. It's been so long ago. I never saw, I have not seen her since the funeral. I don't know whether she's living or dead.
See, I've tried to find her, and somebody, not too long ago, I think it was, matter of fact, I think Anthony Tolan said he knew where she was at. Now, I visited the grave in Detroit there.
Yeah, I know she remarried.
And it's a single grave.
Dick Osgood help you there?
Well, Dick wasn't sure where she was at either. He hadn't seen hiding her hair for years.
I know she got remarried. I know that.
But I know the grave is a single grave, and that either tells me one of two things. Either she's still living or she remarried and is buried somewhere else. Yeah. And I once tried to go out and find the house because it's still off of Grand River in Farmington.
Really?
He had this great big huge house that they had apparently had just moved into. And Dick said it's still there.
You know, I was telling somebody this morning or last night, Earl was under contract in 1941 before he died for $75 a week. At the same time, John Hodiak and Jay Michael, who played Black Bart, and also narrated Sergeant Preston or Challenge the Yukon. There was a lot of money in those days. I was under contract for 65 or 70, whatever it was. Myself and Jay, and there was myself and Fred Flaherty. And Livingston made as much money as the Lone Ranger, Earl Grosser, did. Now, a lot of people don't know how Brace started out in this business. He was a singer and read poems on the air. That's what he started out as at WXYZ Detroit. He had a beautiful, of course, with that voice, how could he help but be anything else beautiful, Terry? But he had a show for half an hour where he read poems, some of them that he wrote himself, and Marguerite Werner was our organist in the big A studio. The dramatic studio was B. Now, I'm sorry, we were C because A studio was the orchestra studio, the organ studio, and second announce studio was B, and we were C. Control was whatever, and the announce booth itself. We had the NBC Blue and the NBC Red in those days before it went to Mutual and then from Mutual to ABC. Some of these things I'm relying on my mind. You must remember that. And if I do make a mistake, forgive me, but that's...
many years ago.
Yes, many years ago.
Okay, now you continued in the role until you had a voice change, and then the role was taken over by who?
Milt Dion.
Okay.
Milt died 2 years later, and a couple of more kids took over before Bob Martin. Bob Martin took over and played the role from started during the war, and then right through until his demise. Of course, they didn't use Dan Reed very much in the late years. Not very much at all.
Okay, can you run down a list of announcers in the order that they, and approximately the years that they were announcers?
Yeah, I told my friend John Cochran. I bought the cassette along. I got it at the library. I had to go there to get some stuff, research some stuff for an audition that I was doing. And I went through the catalog and found only 2 cassettes on the Lone Ranger, but they're old ones. And it turns out that when I played it, they're from during the war years. I cannot for the life of me figure out who the hell the announcer is. It could have been a guy called Bob Hall, who also played the Green Hornet, which Al Hodge played originally. Jack McCarthy played the last one. Dick Osgood had his finger in there at one time. Dick Osgood and I auditioned for the part of Ned Jordan, secret agent, and I got it. I played Ned Jordan. It wasn't on the air very long, 3-4 months, I don't know. But a funny story I have to tell you, Terry. George W. Trendle, who owned the show, strange man, egocentric, complete ego that I have never seen the like of, except for Ray Muir, who was a terror on wheels. I, at that time, was the president of AFTRA, Detroit Local. It's 1946, 47, 48, 3 years running. And of course, the actors used to have their own actors' lounge down in the basement out at East Jefferson Studios, Jefferson, Newark. And I had, negotiations, union negotiations with he and Alan Campbell and Ray Muir. Once a month or once every 6 months. I said, let me see, I saw the man every day. He came out for script conferences. Every day. Nothing went on the air without his approval. And I got out of my brand new Cadillac convertible one day in the parking lot and back in the building. And as I was walking into the studio, the back door, the actors went in the back door. You didn't come in through the grand entrance off Jefferson Avenue. That was verboten. And here, coming out the back door, this rehearsal started at 3 o'clock for the Green Hornet. Now, if you run both shows, Lone Ranger and Sergeant Preston rehearsal started at 11:30 a.m., went till 3 o'clock, till 5, the Sergeant Preston show, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you did 2 shows, you were gone. You didn't have a chance to break dinner, lunch, or anything else. So, as I'm walking in, out comes Mr. Trendle and Chuck Livingston. And I said, good afternoon, Chuck. Mr. Trendle, good day. They nodded. Chuck smiled. I went in. I was sitting down. We just started playing pinochle. That's what we used to play pinochle all the time in between rehearsals and even during rehearsals. Because you had a reading rehearsal all done upstairs in the studio. Reading, timing, dress, on the air. That's it. Cold. Everything cold. So I'm sitting there, starting a pinochle game, and Chuck comes in, all excited. Puts his arm around me. He said, Ernie, when you just passed the old man Trendle, and me? I said, yeah, on the parking lot, yeah. Boy, did the old man give you a compliment. I said, what are you talking about, Chuck? He said, well, he turned to me right after you passed us to go inside the building. He said, my God, Chuck, who was that handsome young man? I'd been working for the old sucker. Since 1933. It was 1946. 13 years. And he didn't know who I was. He used to meet J. Michael, the narrator of Sergeant Preston, in the hall. Paydays, Frank. He would deliver the checks to the actors and the narrators and the announcers himself.
My understanding at Campbell's, or not Campbell's, Trendle's funeral, nobody showed up.
Nobody. Absolutely the same thing as Ray Muir. Ray died a tragic death, and when the show went off the air in 1954, Fred Flowerny and I started Special Recordings, a major recording studio in Detroit. Reason for Special Recordings, as you will know, when Fred Foy signed it off, the Lone Ranger Incorporated was brought to you by Special Recording. And we named it and we hit it. But Ray, when we originally started Special Recordings, Ray had a beautiful townhouse on Duffield, 138 Duffield, right just off main part of Detroit, right where the expressway, the freeway is now. And when his wife started to divorce him, B. Muir, this goes back now, 10 years, because we left. I found a new building for us in East Grand Boulevard for the studio. He died a tragic, lonely death. Nobody liked the man. He was dressed resplendently, wore a carnation in his pocket. In his lapel every day. He had a heart attack. 70, 60 some years of age, I don't know. It's a horrible thing to see these men who don't like anybody, and as a result, they're not respected themselves, and they die a tragic, I don't see tragic death, but a lonely death. Nobody, not even his wife and young son, were there. Buried him.
Says a lot. Getting back to the Ranger announcers, starting out in 33.
Harry Golder.
Okay, then.
Harry had the part of the narrator, so to speak, or the announcer, whatever you want to call him, until, well, the war. He went in the Navy, and I went in the infantry, U.S. Army. Then during the war, it's the guy that I can't figure. I just can't figure him. I know John Cochran knows as much about this business as I do. He got books and everything coming out his ass. Right, John?
Right, Ernie.
Yeah, and I know, I have a darn good idea that once, John, here's this cassette that I have upstairs. We get back to his house in New York. I'm sure you'll recognize it.
Okay.
I think it may possibly be Bob Hall, but I don't know.
Okay.
Bob played.
Now that was, what, through the war or
Through the
part
war,
of the war?
1941 to 1945.
Okay, and then...
Now, Foy came in there. Foy was there before the war, but I don't exactly know in Fred's little book it explains, but I don't recall whether... I think Freddie started back in on the show in 1946, because Fred was with WJLB, Detroit Radio.
I was going to say, I didn't think Foy came
John
in as
knows.
the announcer until about, what, 47 or 48?
According to Reg Jones' book, The Mystery of the Masked Man's Music, Fred Foy came on in July 1948.
All right, you're right. I'll tell you, I know now, you brought it back to my mind, John. He came back, and, you know, any serviceman coming back had to be given back his old job. Freelance or whatever. The union started that because the union was in then. We had no unions prior to the war. And I recall now, Jack, you're right. He went back to WJLB, and then he came down and didn't think, he said that when he was here a couple of years ago, he didn't think he had a tinker's damn of getting the part of the narrator on the Lone Ranger. He's such a tremendous voice, such a tremendous man also.
He finished that through the end of the run in
Right
September
through
54.
1954, yes.
Where did Mike Wallace come in at? And my understanding was Mike Wallace did some of the announcing, a very little bit.
Green Hornet, Terry.
Was it Green Hornet only?
Yeah,
Nothing on the Ranger?
No.
Okay.
No, about a year. We talked about that. Mike was in Chicago about 3 weeks ago, Knickerbocker Hotel, where he received a very prestigious award. An achievement, a broadcast achievement award, humanitarian of the year. And we talked about it then, and he brought my name up several times. It was a great feeling. I'm sure about this. He did the announcer. It was more or less an announcer on the Green Hornet rather than per se a narrator, as J. Michael did on Sergeant Preston. I'm sure Mike did, I can ask him, I'm going to see him Monday. I'm sure he did the Green Hornet from possibly the end of 1941 until he went in the Submarine Corps. I'm still perplexed, though, about this voice that I can't pick out.
All right, Ernie, you had two other announcers on the Low Ranger. They were called Charles Woods and Bob Height.
Bob Height. Bob Height was Green Hornet.
Right.
I haven't heard this tape. I think it's either one or the other.
Bob Height was Green Hornet, not Lone Ranger. No way.
No. He was the announcer on the Low Ranger.
Who? Bob Height?
Bob Height.
You may be right, John.
Yeah.
Woods.
Okay.
Charlie Woods.
Charlie Wood was back in the old days, Lone Ranger, and he did Dr. Fang. And there was another, too, called Jack Lellman I forgot about. Yeah, they're all gone by the wayside.
You're coming here next year, aren't you?
I hope so. If I'm invited, I'd love to
Why
come every year.
don't we see if we can't? Now you're going to see Mike Wallace what, Monday?
Monday or Tuesday. I talked to his wife last night.
Why don't you ask him if next year, if he's not globetrotting somewhere,
Boy,
if we can get together for an hour or two, sometime during the weekend or a day or two after the convention.
Sure.
I'd like to nail a few
to
things
New York,
down.
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
we're not going to expect him to come to Chicago or St. Louis.
If he has the time and
Yeah.
he's available, I'm sure he'd love to be here. I don't think he'd stay. I think he'd maybe come in for an hour and shoo, back.
Well, I don't even mean, even if he doesn't necessarily want to come here, but we can meet him somewhere.
Yeah, well, New York
together
would be
for a little while,
perfect,
yeah.
at CBS.
Yeah.
Right
Exactly.
in his office.
Now, what about Edwards? Where did he fit in?
Doug
all
is
this?
CBS Radio.
Yeah.
Doug.
Well, he still does the stuff in the morning for the CBS Morning
Yeah,
News.
Jack
on
and
the
I were
radio,
up there, when, Jack, last
2 years
time,
ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Doug and I were roommates
Mm-hmm.
for about a year in Detroit. And he's still a dear, dear friend, a dear man. Doug was just a staff announcer. He came from WLS, WLS, where was it? Cincinnati, Ohio? Anyway, he was the same way. He never went in the service, but he left WXYZ and went to New York, CBS News, and he was the head foreign correspondent under Edward R. Murrow.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a picture which I want to bring. I got to bring some of my pictures when I come to these conventions because they mean so much to me, and I know they'd mean a lot to other
I'll
people.
need a couple for the book, too. One of these times I'll have to
Okay,
talk you into
well,
looking
you'd have
through
to
some
make
of
a
them.
copy of it because they're priceless items for me, Terry. But I went to Fort Benning, graduated as a second lieutenant, and then got my first lieutenancy prior to going overseas. We were in New York, and I called Doug from Camp Cook, California, near Fresno. And I said, we're going to be in for one night only, Doug. Oh, God, I got to see you. And this was in 1943, just before I sailed for overseas. And never forget the night. I had a guy called Captain Whalen. Oni Whalen was my nickname for him. Bernie Jones, who was our armor artificer, and Bob Kreitz, who was a first lieutenant infantry. He had sort of my position with Company F, I believe. I was Company H, heavy weapons at that time. And we met Doug at the Stork Club. Now, mind you, there are four of us. It's our last night there, and we want to get laid. And I don't have any money. None of us have any money. We drank it up in a period of maybe 5 hours. We're going all afternoon. Doug met us at 7 o'clock, and we're sitting in this booth. I have the picture of it to verify the whole thing. And he, dear guy that he is, John met him. And I nudged him, and I whispered to him, I said, can you loan me $20? Sure. You see it in the picture, Terry. I'm sitting here, and he's sitting here on the edge of the booth, and you see this gal that took the picture. You see him handing me not a 20, but a 50. And I took it like this, and I stuck it in my pocket, and he says, have a good time, I gotta go back to the office. And we got gloriously drunk, and left for overseas the next day.
Did you accomplish your intended purpose that night?
Damn, I needed it so badly.
What were the stock, give me some names of the stock character actors
All of
that
them?
were consistently on almost all
From
the
what
shows?
year? From the beginning?
Yeah, from what you
Inception?
remember from the beginning.
Okay.
There was always, okay, who played Mustang Mag?
Two gals. The original Mustang Mag was a gal called Beatrice Lively.
Okay.
She married Mac McCoy. One of the other actors played juveniles, characters, whatever. We had the original, I may forget a few names, but they only were there for a few months. The Standard Company in those days, pre-war, Fred Rito, Herschel Mayle, John Tantano, Earl Grosser. I named them in that picture that Larry Gassman from Spurdvac has got in his magazine. Gwen Furman, Lee Allman, Jack McCarthy. I mentioned Fred Rito, Chuck Livingston, course director, Jimmy Fletcher, sound man, Don Durkis, sound man, Bert Jerkis, Shields Jerkis, the whole Jerkis family, sound effect man. Johnny Hodiak, not originally, about a year after showing on the air. John used to come from Chevrolet, plant worker, and sit in the little booth outside, and Jimmy Jewell finally gave him a break. Fred Rito got sick with a gallbladder attack. 5 minutes before the show went on the air, and Jim put Johnny Hodiak in as a replacement. The guy Jim Irwin, who played Michael Axford before, and all different kinds of parts. A lot of people didn't know that Gilly Shea not only played like John Todd. John Todd not only played Tonto, Gilly Shea not only played Michael Ashford, they did all sorts of other parts in all shows, all the shows that WXYZ produced. We had a gal called Margaret Rutherford. Margaret Rutherford, yes. And Joan Leslie, the Joan Leslie. Martha Scott, who was in our town, later became quite a famous actress. I could go on. Right now, if I had just taken the time, Terry, which I should have done, is to mark these down, because they're not vague in my mind, but they are elusive a little bit right now.
Generally,
I probably think of them in 5 minutes.
what other shows besides the Ranger? Did you get into any of the ones like Anne?
Oh, yeah. Anne Worth Housewife.
That's right.
Yeah. The gal who...
You did Ned Jordan, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The gal who did that committed suicide. Jumped out the 15th floor of the Barlam Hotel. Joan Vitez.
What was the reason on that? Dick told me that
Cancer.
a little bit about that.
Cancer.
Yeah.
Dying of cancer. No one knew it except her. Horrible way to go.
Either way.
Yes. Earl Grosser, of course, I mentioned. I will no doubt, Terry, think of a dozen more names. There were only 14 of us at the end. Bill Saunders. Jim Fletcher, I mentioned. Bob Dale, another one. Roll 'em, Mr. Dale. I know, I think.
What'd you start out with scale-wise in 33?
$2.50 a show.
And
Went up to $5. Now, I'm not talking about a show, Terry. I'm talking about three.
3 shows a night. Now, the first show was what? Now, this is we're talking WXYZ local time.
6:30.
And then the second show, now that was for the East Coast. The second show was for Midwest.
New York, Midwest.
Yeah.
And 10:30 West Coast.
Okay.
10:30 to 11.
And my understanding is that John Todd used to occasionally lift
John,
one or two.
all of us.
And sometimes the third show was a little looser than the first two.
Oh, some of you couldn't even talk, some of them, me included. Especially John. Because John, as Tano, he didn't have a lot of lines, and he had such short lines. Okay, Wasabi, we do. Or, whatever. He carried that show. And I've told this story to you several times, Jerry, and I told it at the convention floor last night. about John in later years. He was 87 years old when he died, and he was one of the dearest men I ever met, bar none. He was the first guy that introduced me to my first drink. It was in Manhattan, the Alcove Bar, Jim Gray's Saloon, right next door to the Alcove. And he could drink, man. He was an Irishman. He lived at Webster Hall, and he was a voyeur. He loved the women. Married once, had a child, and we'd get the rehearsal, and Jim Jewell would say, "Where the hell is John Todd? Ernie, go find him. Go over to the hotel, get him." He'd be in the sack with some gal. And this went on from the time I knew John right to until 1937, 38. And I drank so many times with John. One night we're in the Jim Gray's Saloon again, and there were about 10 of us. Tom Dewey, one of the writers. I forgot to mention Tom. Mm-hmm. And Chuck Livingston did quite a lot of acting. He was a hell of a good actor. And we're in the Jim Gray's bar, and there was Jack Petruzzi. He's another one. Raleigh Parker. My God.
He would insult the station manager over the radio week after week, month after month, every week. The station manager was his boss. Insult them, almost using, and sometimes different, I couldn't quite catch it, obscene language, but mostly profane language. He got away with it for a long time.
No class.
A long time.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about the X-rated tape.
Yeah.
But if I was the station manager, he did it once. That means I have no control over him.
Out.
That means
Fired.
you go.
Are you operating on batteries on that whole thing?
Yeah.
You got a real reduced light on this time
Yeah, I
around.
turned it down a little bit.
Oh.
Yes, I.
All right, whenever.
Okay, anyhow, are you rolling again?
Right.
Okay, anyhow,
Rolling
you
now.
started out now at $2.50 for 3 shows a night,
Progressed to $5.
which was about when?
1937, 36. Then I organized the union together with Jack, Dick Osgood, and Raleigh Parker, Jay Michael, Gwen Delani, who was our executive secretary. And the union came into effect in 1939. And we got up to $12.50 a show. Before the show went off the air, we were making $92 a show. Now, again, there was only one show then, 2 shows. The
Right.
last show was kaput. I was making, on all of the radio shows combined, you worked all of them practically, with time out for World War II, as I mentioned before.
Well, then you got $1 a day, though.
But you got to realize, Terry, that money meant so much more.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
I was making, when the show went off the air in 1954, I was making $90,000 a year. Not clear, because then you had internal revenue income tax. You did not have that pre-war. We got up to 90, as I recall, $92.80 per show. Not for the 2 shows. The 2 were combined together, 1 show. They all paid the same. Green Hornet, Sergeant Preston. Well, if you did Green Hornet, Sergeant Preston, and Lone Ranger, you were talking about 3, 6, 8 shows a week. Plus Ned Jordan, 9. Plus the Hermit's Cave, which was from WJR. Plus the Black Ace, from which Jim Jewell directed at WWJ after he left WXYZ, before he went to Chicago and did Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy, with Charlie Flynn.
Let me ask you, now, you're doing shows at WXYZ and you're bouncing over to WWJ.
No confliction.
You mean Frendel didn't have a problem with this?
No, why?
Well,
We're all freelance actors, Terry.
Oh, okay.
And also,
My understanding early on, there was 3 stations that carried the Lone Ranger in 33.
originally you're talking about.
WEBR.
Originally?
Yeah, out of Buffalo. Or KOIL out of Oklahoma City.
Right.
And WXYZ.
Right.
And then Jewell, sometime around October, November-ish of 33, said to Stryker, it's a one-time deal only for us.
Do you know what
Drop the others.
George W. Trendle paid Fran Stryker outright?
It was like $10.
No,
or it was
$300.
Okay. Now, this was to buy the rights to
buy the rights.
everything.
We
All
paid
right,
him
okay.
$10 a script, which he was mailing in from Buffalo.
Right.
There was no Lone Ranger name. No, the original was no. before the show became named The Lone Ranger, Fram was mailing in the scripts at $10 per script, doing a lot of writing for different shows. It was strictly a no-name Western. That's all. But you got to give Trendle credit. He came up with the Lone Ranger idea. There's no question about that in my mind, anyway.
Well, it was about the fifth show, I think, where in the newspaper listings it appears as the Lone Ranger.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then,
For
you know how
title,
they got the name
yeah.
of Silver? First sponsor, Silver Cup Bread. Yeah.
I have an air check, which I'll send you if you want, because it was heard only in Detroit. It wasn't heard around the rest of the country. For the 5th anniversary of Silver Cup sponsorship, where the Lone Ranger and Tano at the end talk about the bread.
1938.
And the fact that it was in November of 38.
Right.
And the fact that they've been on the air for 5 years, and John Todd says, right, you tell them, Kimosabe, you know. So, and it's kind of cute, you know, but they only did that for the Detroit area. Now, I've got both versions of the broadcast, the quote-unquote network version and the local version.
The southern sponsorship was by Merita Bread.
Right.
Because there was co-owned by Silver Cup of Detroit. See? Just like Wonder Bread owns, what's the other bakery? Also
Tasty, isn't it?
Tasty, you got it, yeah. It also is and they own Wholesome, too.
Tom Dougal was, my understanding, put to the task of creating a new show, which he, out of a little bit of paperwork and writing, came up with a thing called Challenge the Yukon.
Yeah.
And you know something I found? Now, you talk about the Elko. Now, the Elko was the meeting spot for, you guys lived down there, didn't you?
Better believe it.
Well, I went to Detroit a couple years ago, and had seen Tony Camarita at Special Recordings, and talked with him, and had seen the Osgoods, went out and had lunch out at their home and stuff. And Dick was very gracious about setting up a meeting with Tom Dougal. And Tom, at the time, was a little under the influence more often than not, and really was not seeing people, was really kind of keeping his distance from everybody.
Yeah.
But Dick set up a meeting, and Tom agreed to it, and I had never met the man before. And rather than meeting me at the hotel where he lives, he said, no, we would not meet there, we would meet down at the alcove. So I went down there, walked in and met him. And there was something during the entire time I interviewed him, there was something about him I couldn't put my finger on. I had never met the man before, but there was something I recognized about the man. I could never put my finger on him. We talked and we talked and we talked. And we had some burgers, and Dick said, he says, well, now, if you're going to do any kind of interviewing and you want facts or detailed information, make sure you get that up front. He says, because as the interview progresses, he says, you're liable to have a few beers on your belt, and then you're going to start getting a little fuzzy. So we did all this stuff up front, and Tom only had one beer, and I had a beer and a couple of burgers, and he refused to let me pick up the tab for it, you know. Yeah. And near the end of the interview, you know, I told him, I says, there's something about you. I says, I can't put my finger on it. He says, but, you know, I've never met you. I says, but there's something I recognize about your face, and I can't put my finger. It was just driving me batty for about the hour and a half we were in there. And so we kicked around a few things, and lo and behold, what it turned out to be was he was the skull.
Oh yeah.
On Shock Theater.
Shock Theater television.
And I used to watch that as a kid. It would come on at 11:30 at night.
WXYZ. Yeah.
And they would have these real. It was like looking at the letters underwater, and they probably did a camera shot that way, where it would be Shock Theater, and he was the skull that they would have on the TV.
He had that for years.
Yeah,
well, you know,
and I never knew that.
I forgot to mention a couple of other sound effect men who were almost original. Dewey Cole, Fred Fry, and Fred Cole. Fred went to Hollywood. He married Lorene Tuttle. And he passed away when he was 42 years old. Les Tremaine and I... he went with us to Catalina Island in 1948, 49, when I was out there doing a screen test for Paramount. But I know, Terry, that the minute we get through with this little interview, I'm going to think of all those other names, John. I know I will. It just escaped me now for some reason. I don't know. Tired.
Well, now Brace was one to tip back one or two.
Brace, I can
I've got
tell you
a photo of him in a hallway leaning against a wall.
That was with me. I gave you that, didn't I send you that?
Yes, and
Now, let me
he
tell
is
you,
really 3 sheets to the
That
wind.
was the only time I ever saw Brace Beamer drunk. He was the dearest man. Absolutely.
In a full tux. What was it? Do you remember what the occasion
Yeah, it was Elaine Alpert's wedding. Elaine played later on, Ma, whatever the hell her name was. It was her wedding reception at the Statler Hotel, and I was driving that night, his new Pontiac. And he had the long tie, and the long tails, and the white tie, and the top hat, and the red lined cape. So the thing is over about 2:30 in the morning. Brace says to me, and mind you, he was so resplendent, this man. There was no way I could tell you what a fine man this was, if he liked you. If he didn't like you, look out, man, look out. So he says to me, I gotta go to the men's room. And I said, come on, Brace. I guided him to the men's room. Now, mind you, there are 4 stalls, 4 urinals, and there are about 4 toilets with the door on, the not pay toilets in the Statler. We get in the John, and he's taking a piss, and he's leaning against the wall, and doesn't have his hand on it. And some stranger walks in, part of the party. This was on a mezzanine at the Statler. We had the grand ballroom for the reception, 500 people or thereabouts. And it was reputed that Elaine was his girlfriend. Not true, no way. Sure, she was always up in his office every day and all that, and they drank together at the Van Dyke Club, but no, I could never believe anything, and it was told around. I told people, I don't want to hear stuff like that. So, this guy walks in. He's behind, Brace can't see him, but he hears the door open and close. And he says, Ernie, I'm holding him up at the urinal. He says, Ernie, who the fuck is in my bathroom? I said, Brace, it's a public bathroom. We gotta go home. Well, he had rented a hotel room. The Whittier, no, not the Whittier, another one. Right on Woodward Avenue. We get down, by this time it's 2:45 in the morning. A nice warm night, and I got the doorman to go bring the car. He's standing with his back up against the wall of the Statler Hotel on Washington Boulevard, Detroit's finest boulevard. And he's just like this. And I said, Brace, I'm going to drive. I said, Brace, you're not touching the wheel of that car now. I'm going home, and I'm going to stay all night with you. All right. Now, mind you, he's got the top hat on. Got the full flowing cape with a red velvet lining. Resplendent. And these 3 young Marines come walking by. This was in 1950. And the one young Marine, they're all drunk and on leave, and this one young kid says, hey guys, look at the fucking magician. And Brace, now they'd gone another 10 feet down the sidewalk. Brace just said, hold it. These guys stopped dead in their tracks. The guys walked back, and he's standing there, hunched up with his shoulders and this severe look on his face. This guy says, that voice, you're the Lone Ranger. He says, you're fucking right, I'm the Lone Ranger Marine. He says, did you know that I was an infantryman in World War I? When I was 2 years younger than you are. He was 15 when he was in World War.
He was gassed.
Hero,
during
too.
War, too.
Hero.
Yeah. I read the diary.
Received a medal, almost a Medal of Honor, Silver Star, something like that. And the guy says, I'm sorry, Mr. Beamer, I'm sorry. We're sorry, Lone Ranger. And they're all trying to explain at once. He said, all right, hold it. He grabs this guy by the shoulder. He says, come here, young man. He says, you guys on leave? He says, yes, sir, 3 days. He said, you know where we broadcast from, WA? No, anytime he sobers up like that. You know where we broadcast from on East Jefferson Hill? Yes, sir, we do. Boy, we'd sure like to see a show. Be my guest. And if you don't show up, I'll track you down because I got a little important contacts. He meant it too. Be there Monday night and be there on time. We go on the air at 6:30. I want you there at 6 because they only had 6 seats to view. No one was invited. You had a special VIP. They showed up, and he took them upstairs. I watched the whole thing. He signed not the ones that went out to the general public. I wish I had one today. In full regalia, in full costume, with no mask. And the Lone Ranger was never seen without the mask. These guys were so thrilled, all you had to do was look in their eyes. You saw the tear in this one Marine Sergeant's eye. You got to be someone. You got to be a great person, a great human being, in order to do something like that. This kind of man.
I read his diary. It's kept in the God, I can't think of the name of it. There's a corner of the Detroit Library where all that paperwork was turned into. I can't think of it.
Yeah.
Something collection, the Burton collection.
Burton collection, true, yes.
And his wife, or widow at the time, had given me permission to get into the personal papers, and they have his personal handwritten diary that he kept during World War I.
Do you know that's news to me?
Yeah, and he was gassed. He was gassed and hospitalized.
I knew that.
And all those entries are in there.
Yeah, I did.
And he lied to get in. He was like 14 when he went in.
You know, he was just tall.
Yeah.
He didn't grow anymore after 15. He was 6'3.5", something like that. I got to tell you another funny story about Brace. Not a funny story, but true. About once every 2 weeks, I'd go to his farm with him out in Lake Orion. And I didn't drink heavily in those days. I didn't think I did anyway. But we would start out, now get this, we'd start out at the Van Dyke Club at about 10 minutes after 8, 10 minutes after the show was off the air. Brace always dressed casually for the shows. He never drank that I knew of, and according to Lita also, such a wonderful woman. During the show in the mornings or anything else, but at 8:10, 8:15, we'd start out the weekends that I saw him he'd stop in the Van Dyke for a drink every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after the show was off the air, and maybe be there for 5-10 minutes and say goodnight, gone. I learned the routine that he had very early. We would go from the Van Dyke. Now, mind you, he was drinking in those days, not towards the end, because he quit drinking, didn't have a drink 3 years before he passed away. Drinking double martini straight up with a bottle of little splits of Budweiser, chaser. I often said to Brace, and other people did too, why do you drink that beer after the martinis or with the martinis? It alkalizes the system. It gets that gas out of your system. Yeah. We'd have, now I was drinking Manhattans in those days. Didn't drink martinis until later. He'd have maybe 3 drinks. Now two, 2 doubles. It's 4 drinks. 2 splits of Budweiser, 1 every time he got a double, or 1 every time he got 2 doubles. From there down west on Jefferson Avenue towards downtown to Charlie Costello's. And same thing there, so now you're talking about 4 drinks, right? And 2 little bottles. Then went to Statler Lounge Bar, same thing. By this time it's 11 o'clock. Went out to the Italian restaurant out on Woodward Avenue going north, Ricardo's or something like that. Same thing there. Next stop in the Detroit area, in the outskirts, the suburbs, was the Kingsley Inn, where Nick Takas, one of his best friends, owned. We had our final drink in town there. I was all on Nick Takas. We didn't spend a dime. Then we drive out it took 20 minutes to get from the Kingsley out to Lake Orion. There's a little bar there called Mike's Place. Good little bar. By this time I had slowed way down, but I was feeling no pain. But Brace always insisted on driving. He was a good driver, too. Hit this Mike's Place, and there again, they had it all set up. We're ready to set up. We'd have our drinks there, and then back home, and sometimes Lita and he and I would sit up playing gin for hours. And I swear, I never saw Brace Beamer drunk except that one time. And then he could sober up like this. Of course, he had that bigness, that he could take a lot of booze without hurting himself. I don't think he drank on weekends except socially. You know, he was playing bridge the night that he died when he had suffered a heart attack with a couple of friends of his and Leader's. I got to tell you a story, Terry, of how great this man was in my heart. I was taken prisoner in Czechoslovakia by the SS troops. Treated me very viciously. I did not know what was wrong with me after I was liberated by the Russian Cossacks. Horrible outfit. And this sergeant major, in the kind of same compound I was in, there were only one other American officer besides myself in that same compound. And we had taken a walk and gone to the Burgermeister's office where we picked up weapons, cameras, whatever. We had wheelbarrows full of them to distribute among the other POWs. We heard a woman scream, and Bill said, "What the fuck is that?" We run behind this farmhouse and hear these Cossacks, a Russian major and a Russian sergeant, had killed this goat, and they had skinned it, and they had gotten the milk out of it before it died, and they had it in a big tin bucket. And this poor woman was screaming. We didn't know until a few minutes later that they had killed her husband, the farmer, and they had raped her. Horrible. And they offered the milk to Bill and I downed it. I hadn't had milk. I had never had milk overseas in combat or otherwise. And then this Russian saw the bars on my collar, my first lieutenant bars, pulled out his Russian Luger. It was a Russian, I forget the name of it now, Terry. Had it right in my guts. I froze. I didn't know what the hell to do. And Bill, who had been a prisoner of war since El Alamein and Dunkirk, the other prisoners of war, 5 years or more, started to explain real fast. Speaking in Russian, I don't understand what the hell is going on, but I'm scared. And he was telling the Russian that I wasn't a prisoner of war. You see, it was a disgrace to the Russians to have an officer taken prisoner, not an enlisted man. See? And all of a sudden, the Russian, whose breath smelled foul, took me in his arms and kissed me full on the mouth. I wanted to spit. And what Bill had said to him simply was that I was not a prisoner of war. I was not an American prisoner of war. I was a liaison officer sent by the Allied forces to get us out of occupied Czechoslovakia, which was then not because it was overrun by the Russians, on their way to Prague, where the fighting lasted for another 12 days. Cost a lot of lives. But I started to get ill. I was in Van Nuys General Hospital out in California for 6 months after VJ Day, VE Day. And I had a great ball there. I had a wonderful time, except I was sick all the time, and I didn't know. They took all kinds of various tests on me and couldn't figure out what the devil it was. So I came back here. I called Chuck Livingston. I was working at a gas station for $35 a week, 12, 14 hours a day, and working my ass off. I was down to 125 pounds when I came out of POW camp. And I relived my old friendship with Johnny Hodiak, and he got me set for this screen test with Paramount, and the Screen Directors Guild went on strike, and therefore it was stalled, never to come about again until 2 years later. And I called Chuck Livingston. Chuck says, whenever you want to come back, Ern, come back. You'll start the day you get back, which was true and which happened. I'd been back about 3 weeks, and I was going through these horrible periods, Terry, of these violent headaches. I've never had anything like it. As if someone had a tight steel band right around, like a headband, and they were twisting it like a vice, like yay. And I'd break out of these cold sweats. The sweat would pour off me. And then I'd get this violent fever. I mean, I'd run. There was no temperature. It was just, I was hot. My head was hot. My whole body was hot. And I'd get red all over like a sunburn. Wasn't burn. So 5 minutes away from the show, and I was playing the young juvenile lead, a young doctor and Elaine Alpert was playing my wife-to-be. I could feel this thing coming on all day, and I prayed that it wouldn't happen while I was on the air. And I got off the air, and my last line, I fell to the floor. And Brace Beamer picked me up in his arms and hugged me, and I couldn't talk. He carried me bodily out to his car out in the parking lot and drove me to Henry Ford Hospital. The man saved my life. The doctors told me 2 days later I was in a semi-coma for 2 days. Now, the 12th day I was there, they were ready to discharge me from the hospital. They could not find, after 30 tests maybe, everything. Pneumatic fever is what they thought it was. It's a heart problem. Well, it turned out to be, they finally, on the last day, Dr. Green, an intern, who I owe my life to besides Brace, gave me an allergy test on the back. It's like 40 different shots of serum that they give you. I still have the scars on my arms. Right there, they were as big as that, like a vaccination. They discovered it was on fever, and thank God, because of Edsel Ford's death, prior to World War II, I believe it was, he died of unlet fever, and they had not developed the serum until 1946, just before I was taken to the hospital. So, I give Brace credit for saving my life.
Big side, high side.
It's a guy, Terry, that if he loved you, anybody else could say anything wrong about you, boy, he'd kill you. He wasn't vicious or violent, but if he did not like you, look out.
Now, what's your birth date?
Virgo, September 13th, 1918, born on Friday the 13th when I was 13 years old. My birthday fell on Friday the 13th.
Really?
I got out of the service on February 1946, the 13th. 13 has been a very important number in my life.
When did you come over from England? You were born in England, huh?
Yeah, 9 years old, in 1929.
Whereabouts in England were you born?
Salford, Manchester, but I lived in Southport, Lancashire, the seaside resort, like Atlantic City. Came over with my mother. My dad was all right, my stepfather, or rather, Winstanley. That's not my real name.
Which is?
Glew, G-L-E-W. My real father, Major Glew, was the hero killed in World War I in the Ardennes. Fell on a grenade, received the Victoria Cross, the highest award that the British government can convey on a man. Winstanley adopted me after he came back. One of 13 children, incidentally.
Big family.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing, the going thing in those days was Irish, Scotch, English.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many, France or Germany, I don't think they had big families, but the English, the Irish, and the Scotch, prolific. Had a wonderful mother.
What was her name?
Mary. My father's name was Joseph. Mary and Joseph, Joseph and Mary.
And your stepfather?
Bert, Herbert. I was a Christ child. This is a major part of my book, my autobiography, which I've been writing for three and a half years now. It's going to be good, Terry.
I hope I get a
I
copy.
have poured my guts out. You got to pay for it. Do you think that's good? Not even he gets one. They're my best friends. I poured my
not a problem, but a little something written on the cover there.
Oh yeah, I poured my. Dick Osgood maybe pay $15.95. But that copy is.
He got a real shaft job.
Oh, I know he did.
Whole deal. It was terrible.
Man. Dick Osgood was a wonderful man to me. I broke my arm in a fight before the war in 1938, 39. Dick was divorced from his first wife before he married his present wife, Ann, who you know is a dear person.
And I remember his first wife's Nancy, isn't it?
Nancy Osgood.
Who he still sees occasionally.
I don't know. I didn't know that.
Well, I don't mean on the side. No, but no.
What the hell is wrong with that? He's too fucking old to do anything. He's 6 years old, Terry. He couldn't get a hard on if he. I'm not saying anything on his back. Dick couldn't get a hard on if he.
No, I think he told me the last time they were in Florida. She lives in Florida, and Dick and Ann stopped in and seen her. So
I think he'd try. I do. He's a devil.
Oh, I know he is.
He really is.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you there. I saw Dick this last summer. Spent the weekend with them at their cottage.
Cottage over in Canada?
Yeah, Canada,
Yeah.
yeah. Delightful spot. Well, anyway, I was starting to tell you, Dick took me in. I was living by myself at the time in a small apartment over someplace on the east side of Detroit. No, the west side, I'm sorry. And I couldn't dress myself. You know, I had the arm like this in the cast. And he'd help me dress. We had the bit go around, a bunch of shit. One night, I refused to Dick, an elevator operator in the Matthews building. Now get this. That little bitch, good-looking broad too, she stopped the elevator in between floors. We were on the 15th floor, and the 14th floor were the general offices of WXYZ Incorporated. I refused to Dick her, see, because I was dating Jimmy Jewell's secretary. I'll never forget her, Roma Davis. Dick has it in his book, mentions her. And she got pissed. But one night, Dick Osgood and Johnny Slagle and I went to a blind pig downtown, Black Bess's. Either that or, I don't know, a half dozen that time. And we were drunk. John wasn't. He was driving. But he had to pick up a script for the next day or something. He announced the Children's Theater of the Year, which Dick Osgood later took over. And Dick and I were in the back seat. I don't know why. And I had fallen asleep and on Dick's shoulder like this, and he had his arm around me. And he's half crocked, and he's almost out. This little broad comes out of the Maccabee building, side entrance, there we are. And she claimed that I was going down on Dick, that I was blowing him. Terrible. Really terrible. That sucker.
No pun intended, right?
Just because I wouldn't dick her. That's terrible, John. Yeah, I would have eaten her had I known that. Shit. I hope the audience doesn't. You don't listen to. You're not going to show this to many people. I hope so, for my sake. Jeez, especially.
Well, you know, Dick's told me some things that. He wrote that book, and they made him cut it down. There was a third of that he took out almost.
Yeah.
And I asked him. I said, "Wait a minute." When I found that out, I says, "Where are those pages?" You know, I wanted to know what was taken out of the book.
Yeah.
Well, there was a lot of stuff that he knew. He wrote everything just as he remembered it, and there was a lot of stuff that would have been libelous to begin with if you would have left it, and so that came naturally. And then, of course, he had to pare down a few others and condense a little because the book was too big.
Sure.
So I said, well, where is this stuff? Well, he had it all thrown in a box in the closet, okay? And he said he'd been wrapping stuff up in it. He'd crinkled them up and used for packing, if he sent gifts off to somewhere, wrap fish in it, whatever. So I said, wait a minute. I says, I got to see this because, I'm doing this thing on the Lone Ranger. Well, he thought about it for a while, and he thought about it for a while. It was about a month or 2 months later, I went up to Detroit. And, he only lives not even 5 miles. Yeah, not even 5. Yeah, it was over at his house. Yeah. Well, he lives not even 5 miles from my parents.
Oh, really?
Well, they live on Farmington Road between 7 and 8 miles.
Yeah.
So he finally said, well, what are you going to do with this stuff? And I said, well, I want to read through it. And I says, I would certainly, if anything I use, because you did the research, I would certainly get your permission ahead of time. And I said, I would never include anything that would have to be, of a libelous nature to begin with. I says, but it gives you, background-wise, they're not just names and dates associated with a show. There's some human qualities here.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, so he gave me this big box of all these typewritten sheets.
Now.
Okay, well, no, I gave them back to him.
Oh.
And he gave me this big box of all these cassette tapes of all these interviews that he had done over about 10 years. Yeah, okay. Now, the tapes were starting to deteriorate.
Right.
When the oxide coating was coming right off of them, as you played them, they'd come right off and gunk up the machine.
Yeah.
Well, I was very fortunate in getting all of the cassettes transferred to reel-to-reel. I have them all saved. Some of them, I don't think you'd even play the cassettes anymore. They're terrible.
Yes.
And I Xeroxed all of these pages. And I told him I was going to Xerox and copy them and shuffle them together. And I gave him back the originals because I think what he wanted to do was he wanted to donate them somewhere as private papers, not for publication.
Well, he did donate a lot of his stuff to the National Archives.
Well, I started reading through some of this stuff and some of the voice tape interviews that he had done, and they were talking about who was getting laid on somebody's desk in the back room. There was a lot of stuff that you definitely could not publish, but it did make it did make a little more of a human human nature and quality to the people.
You know, when
there.
I was back in Detroit a couple of years ago before I left for Chicago, Dick did me a tremendous favor. No, I'm sorry, it was after I moved to Chicago, about 2 months. I sent him a couple of unedited, raw chapters of my book, and they were concerning the war years, not being a prisoner of war, but in actual combat. And there is no way, if you've read any combat books, and I'm sure you have, in Platoon, for example, if you saw that, or Hamburger Hill, or any of them, the word fuck is used, and I don't like to use the word fuck, please understand that. It's used vociferously, it is used constantly, you don't even know you're saying it. Fuck you, Charlie, fuck this, and so I used a lot of those words, and he said, please, Ernie, do yourself a favor. He wrote me a letter back, and he critiqued it on the side as an editor does, a book editor does. And I'm so appreciative of that fact that he did that, because I found in rereading after I had edited it, wasn't necessary.
No, it's not. But
and I have taken out 50% of those.
You know, I spent 12 years in the Air Force,
Yes.
and I flew B-52 combat missions over there for 3 of the 6 years that I was really into the combat end of it. Now, I didn't go through like you did on the ground. I got a little unique experiences with missiles being fired at us and things like that. You know, we had our own little world of worry too. But there is a difference, and when you're with a set of guys 24 hours a day, you work with, you eat with, you play with, you sleep with, everything. There becomes the language just becomes the language, and it's not vulgar. It's just that's the way the language is. So yeah, there is a lot of that, and I think that when people look at movies like Platoon or Full Metal Jacket and a few of the other movies that have come out, you go in knowing that, or at least if you go in looking at it ahead of time, saying this is the way that world is, you know, for that period of your time. It's accepted, and it's not looked at as a vulgar thing.
I got to tell you a little story.
War itself is a vulgar experience to begin with.
Tell me.
Sure.
I got to tell my good friend John Cochran, something which I've never told. I've never bared it to him before. A true story. I had a platoon sergeant, Company E, Captain Whalen's company, in combat, and he had become a good friend of mine. Red-haired Irishman, as John is. And we were in static positions on the Rhine, and my position was on the top of this church tower, bombed-out church tower. I had my platoon sergeant, Jacobson, Jake, right alongside of me. The night before, Cochran had led a patrol in engineer boats, a recon patrol that is not a combat patrol, as you know, that don't engage in combat, simply to search out enemy positions without being observed or seen. They don't even take their guns over.
That's right. You should go totally unarmed.
Go in the little rubber rafts, 4 men to a raft. He took this little patrol of 4, and they were due back at 0300, and no show. So I was observing when the dawn came up. The Rhine was at spots 20, 30 feet deep with a current of maybe 30 miles an hour, rough. And the dawn came up and the sun started rising over the horizon. I'm looking through my binoculars, and gradually as they came into being, into sight, I see them cowered under the ledge of the bank. All 4 of them, and the rubber raft is pulled up out of sight under this hanging ledge. Right on top of them, hidden in the underbrush, but I see the gunner, and I see the gunner and the assistant gunner. Heavy machine gun, German machine gun. Oh my God. I get the walkie-talkie, and his walkie-talkie is out. I can't contact him, and then it crackles in. I said, John, get your ass out of there. Now, before the light comes up. Get out, now. And I can hear him say, meaning that he would be observed. He wouldn't have been observed. And then I hear him vaguely say, now. And I see them jump in the raft, and I said, oh my God. They didn't get 20 feet out, 30 feet out. The Germans blasted the shit out of him with the machine gun. He couldn't swim, Terry. Poor guy. Husky, handsome guy. And I see the other 3 men drop one by one into the water, gone, dead. And I see him drifting with the current downstream, and just as he got to the edge of the dike, almost, say, 50 yards from our side, the south side or the west side, I'm not sure, I hauled ass downstairs, and I got my number one gunner. My 50 caliber heavy was mounted right on the machine, right on the Jeep. I said, come on. I got behind the wheel, and I went like hell down the road to maybe 50 or 75 yards where I saw him drop into the rubber raft, not into the water. And I jumped out of the Jeep, and I told my number one gunner, set it up on the bank behind the dike, and start opening fire immediately at the German gun, which they did, and I said, call for artillery, knock them out. I ran like hell. I'm running across this farmyard right next to this farmhouse, and the Germans used to take all their excrement, cattle, dogs, anything, you name it. And they formed a pit, which is maybe 6 feet wide and 3 foot deep, not very deep. I'm running like hell across this farmyard, and the dawn had just come up. And I fell headlong into this pit of excrement. I wore that stuff, seeped into my boots, into my uniform, for a month before I was able to take a bath. But as I reached where I thought the approximate spot would be where the current would take John, his name wasn't Cochran, it was Cochran. And he comes crawling over the top, bleeding profusely. And I grabbed him, and they were still firing from across the river. I grabbed him and I hollered for a medic. I didn't know whether there'd be one around, but thank God there was. And he came up and he started administering his aid, and they carried him back by Jeep to the rear echelon, rear lines. And he was a Section 8. And there was mental shame, horrible shame. But the funny thing is, Jake comes up in another Jeep 5-6 minutes later, and he says, he called me Win. Win, you smell like shit. I said, I should smell like shit. I'm covered with this all over me. And I didn't, I swear, get a chance to take a bath, and I bathed in the Rhine River. When we crossed at Remagen, when we went down from Düsseldorf, to Remagen, and crossed at Remagen with Patton's Third, and cleared out the Rhine, then went on through southern Germany, and the push through southern Germany. And I like to remember not the serious side of war. It's a horrible thing to go through.
You never remember the serious side.
No, I don't want to remember it. I still to this day don't, but I remember the fun side, the funny things that happened. Had a young kid, we were in the Rhine, in the Ruhr Valley, and we were supposed to engage in combat with the enemy. We were again established in this position, my 4 guns, my 450 caliber heavies, 15 yards apart, with your gunner in slit trench behind, in the edge of this woods. Complete clearing out here, maybe 100 yards, and then a road, embankment on a road out here, which the Germans occupied that territory. Now, little did we know that there was a small village on our right and another one on our left. Well, Company E was supposed to jump off here at 0500, and Company F at 0500, led by Captain Kudyback. And I got the order to open fire at about 0455. Now, we engaged in combat, in firing, rather, for a good 10 minutes. And about 8 minutes had gone by. I mean, steady firing and receiving fire. And I thought it was coming directly from the front, but little did I know it was coming from the side over here, from this German-held village. And I hear someone scream, I mean loud, I'm hit, I'm hit, I'm hit. And I looked over, and here's this young red-headed boy from Iowa, who was one of the ammunition bearers. I crawled over to him, and there's bullets racking all around me. And he was the only one that got hit. Well, all I could do, because we were still engaged in the combat, was drag him. I grabbed him around the shirt and pulled on his shirt, and it was tremendous effort. I'm not pulling any glorious hero crap. This was factual. I got him back, and I hollered, scream for a medic, and they dragged him back. The entire engagement took another 45 minutes before it was all over. And the first thing I did, because I was so concerned about this kid, he had insisted that he be in combat. He had lied about his age. He was only 17 years old. He wasn't 19. And I was so concerned about this kid because I had not wanted him in action. I hadn't wanted him in combat. I wanted him back in the mess where he was originally. And I finally found the aid station, and I got this lieutenant who I knew, a first lieutenant, doctor, medic. And I said, where the hell is, I forget his name now. Is it private, PFC? And I said, yeah, where is he? Dead? No, he's all right. What do you mean he's all right? He's over there, sitting against that tree. I went over, and the kid was sobbing in hysterics. I'm looking for blood, and I can't see any blood. And I said, what, are you all right? Where did you get hit? Well, it turns out, strange, funny, we used to take and slit our field jackets, take the inside lining, and we were eating no K rations in those days because all we had was C rations, meat and beans, pork and beans, corned beef hash, and all good stuff, Armours. Don't give me any Swift, boy, that's too salty. Great friend of mine in Detroit used to tell that story. But he had 3 cans of beans back here, pork and beans with all the red juice in there, and 3 of the others on the back sitting on his ass. So a German bullet ripped through one of those cans, and at the hot fire produced by the bullet going through the can, he thought he was hit. And he thought the juice from the pork and beans, was blood running down his rectum. He thought he was hit. Not a scratch on another Section 8. I had to send him back to Section of Shame.
We had I'll tell you one, we were talking about Section 8s, I'll tell you one quickie. We had, in Thailand, the base was hit, and I flew B-52s, and they're all in revetments, and these revetments are pretty massive.
You were the pilot, were you?
No, I worked on a weapons release computer.
I see.
And the revetments are built up out of like half-inch steel, and then you down in between the walls, you fill it with sand and pour concrete. So they'll take mortars hits on the other side and protect the aircraft, right? We had one day where the base, they got through the concertina wiring and the perimeter and stuff and got in. And their main goal in life, the satchel charge North Vietnamese regulars, were to get the aircraft, knock the aircraft out. They weren't so much interested in personnel, because if you can knock out an aircraft, that's one aircraft that can't carry 30 tons of bombs north, So they come around the corner revetment, and there was a crew chief working on the aircraft, and he was walking around the revetment as this guy came around from the other side. Well, of course, they just collided into each other. And, of course, it scared the shit out of both of them. And this North Vietnamese regular was the one that recovered the quickest and got up, and by this time the crew chief's standing up, and this guy just leveled a pistol right in his face and pulled the trigger 6 times, 6 misfires.
Oh, my God.
Well, by this time he gave up, and he threw the satchel charge, and it damaged part of the wing on the aircraft, which was superficial damage. And by this time the APs they're pulling out their in chiefs, and they nailed this guy. And this crew chief's still standing there, totally gone. Mentally, just totally gone. And they just literally picked him up, threw him in a jeep, and just flew him out. And I don't think that guy ever got straight back to Texas.
I had another private, Terry, and we're engaged in a combat situation at the time. And this kid thought he was hit too. The bullet went right in the front of his helmet, just above his hairline. Now that bullet went round and round and round in his helmet until it expended itself. And put your hand down here, it burned his head in a perfect circle,
all the way around.
All the way around. And
Well,
I don't think that hair would
heat.
ever grow back. I had another interesting story, Lieutenant Kilgore. When I was in the hospital in Van Nuys, California, I thought Kill was killed because we went up and he was supposed to be in a 2.5-ton truck that was blown up by a German landmine. But I'm sitting in the mess hall having breakfast this one day, about the second week after I'd been in the hospital. And, the way some people do to surprise you, they put your hand there from behind you, they put your hand high. And I took the hands away, and I looked around. It was Kilgore. I said, "For Christ's sake, Kilgore, I thought you were dead." "No, man, I wasn't dead." He told me the story. He had been going up to the lines. They were right behind me. He was a platoon leader in Company D or something like that, 386th Infantry, 3rd Battalion, I believe. And he was climbing up into the cab of this 2.5-ton truck. Now, we used to wear our grenades, either here in the lapels or on our belt with the safety pin pulled, just with the hook. So you pull that sucker out and you threw it,
ready.
And it was boom. 5 seconds later, it was off. He was getting up on the running board to the 2.5-tonner, and as he got up, he had one leg on the ground, one leg on the running board. And the door hit one of these grenades and blew right in between his legs. Well, if it hadn't been for the fact that he was leaning over to get in, it would have really blown his balls off. But it literally blew his ass off. And they had formed him a new ass. Made out of rabbit's fur. I'm serious, John. Made out of rabbit's fur. And when he'd take that damn contraption off, he had the flattest ass you ever saw. And funny, really funny. But those
when were you? From what period to what period were you
Prisoner?
POW?
From the war was over in May the 8th, 1945. I was captured the January, February, March the 15th, around there. A little less than 2 months. Didn't get any food. Of course, they didn't have any food.
Yeah.
The Germans or something. I knew if we got on the war, we wouldn't get back to anything else, especially you being an ex-serviceman. But there are a lot of funny stories I'd like to tell you about the old radio days. I mean, funny.
Give me one of your most embarrassing moments, because we're going to have to get going.
My most embarrassing moment
Embarrassing.
when I was playing Cato as a Filipino. And the Green Hornet always gassed his victims, or his crooks, so to speak. And he always queried Cato with, is he all right from my gas gun? And this one night, he said to me, "How is he, Cato?" And I says, "Oh, Mr. Blitt, he pissed out," instead of he passed out. That was embarrassing. And we never got any calls on those things, John.
You don't catch it, Ernie. You don't catch it.
No, you don't. You don't really.
No.
When I told Jim Fletcher to go fuck himself when we were doing sound effects, I didn't know the microphone was open. It was on the Lone Ranger show. Another time, John Todd, quiet scene in the desert. And Brace has been hit by a bullet by Butch Cavendish, okay?
Oh, yes.
And Jim and I are down on our knees, and we're going to use the thunder drum for shots of the outlaws approaching, riding in to do him in, to do the Lone Ranger in. And he punched me for some reason. He and I were the dearest friends, still are. And by God, he punches me in the belly or someplace, What the fuck you doing, Fletcher? I said, "Fuck you, you asshole." And Larry Ledoux, the engineer, John, had, he had the microphone down, and it wasn't heard by anyone. No calls, nothing. Uh-oh, burned my ass. Well, that's nothing new.
There you go.
That sucker is nothing new. Thanks, dear. Thanks.
There was a what the hell was it here? Not
What's your language,
2-3
Jerry?
years ago.
Don't say hell on the air.
2-3 years ago, there was up here in the Northeast here, station signed off the air, TV station signed off the air, and in the control room they threw a couple cassettes in, and they were showing porn movies. And dragging up there and having some people.
Yeah.
They were still on the air.
Yeah,
It was still being
yeah.
broadcast. And they did this for like 2-3 hours, and there was nobody called in to complain.
Do you remember that kid show, Uncle Ed or Uncle Bill or something?
Oh, yeah, Uncle Don.
Chicago, Uncle
Yeah,
Don,
Uncle
where he
Don.
signed off, "I hope you're satisfied, you little sons of bitches."
That's right.
Never
Joe
seen
Franklin
it.
said it never happened.
Who?
Joe Franklin. You know who Joe Franklin?
He said it never, it was he,
He
Uncle
said it never
Milt.
happened. It was a publicity stunt for a newspaper man up in Massachusetts with nothing to do that day, nothing to write about, no copy, whatever they call it, to the paper, and made up the story. Now, any version I've heard of it they've cut it so much, it doesn't sound like Uncle Don said it at all. And it's supposed to be purportedly Uncle Don saying, I guess all these sons of bitches for a little while.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever said it. I also used to listen to Uncle Don all the time. I don't recall him ever saying
Well, you know, there was the announcer, the football announcer, that got so wrapped up in the game. And when the guy had caught a Hail Mary, and it was...
Harry Wismer was that?
I don't know who it was, but the guy was talking about how he's on the 30s, on the 20s, he's on the 20s, on the 30s. Look at that son of a bitch go! And this was live on radio, so yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God! Well, thank you again, Ernie.
You're welcome, Terry. I'll tell you one thing before we leave. I have never, in all the things that I've done in my world of broadcast, have I ever been. I'm thrilled to be here. And I'll tell you the main reason. I met John Cochran 2 years ago. And it was strictly by accident, but I think I asked you to go get something from my room, which I should. Isn't that right, John?
That's right. You shouldn't have asked anybody.
Well, but John, without a whim or a why, he went and he got it. And we turned into dear friends, and this has happened so much at the Spurtback Convention, too. Guys like you, Terry. Guys like Tony, who's not a good friend like you are, but I am proud of the fact that I'm able to be here because every time I come, even my horoscope said it, Friday, before I left. Those are friendships which you hang on to, which become a part of your lifelong memory in this business. And it's great to have that strong, real feeling, devoted feeling. Because they are friendships that will live and will live forever.
Well, they're friendships that I've formed, not only with you and Dick Osgood and a lot of other people that I've met over the years. I hold these much more dear. There's a common interest. There's something that you did, and we certainly appreciate. Yeah. And so there's a common interest bond there. Yeah. But you find out that there's a little something more there. That's not the same as a normal friendship.
Right. Normal, yeah. You know what? I'm sure that the other actors, talent on these shows, in various years, I'm sure they feel the same way I do. The people out there who are very nice people, these conventioneers, they look up to these people in awe, the celebrities, the stars. I don't feel like a celebrity. I don't want to be called a star, and I'm sure they feel the same way. Sometimes I'm embarrassed. I am, truthfully. And I'm sure guys
I gotta tell you, a couple of years ago, the first time I met Fran Stryker Jr., I was going to give a talk on the Lone Ranger show, and this goes back, 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago maybe. And Jay Higgerson called me at home and said, confirmed that I was giving the talk on it, and I said, yeah. Fine, good, thank you. And he hung up, and about 3 days later, Joe Webb calls, and he said, Jay tells me you're going to do this show, and he says, we just heard that Fran Jr. is going to come listen to what you had to say about his father. I said, you really know how to intimidate somebody, And I didn't even know about Fran Jr. Had I known about that there was a Fran Jr. somewhere, I would have certainly, beaten a path to his door a long time before that. Yeah. Fran and I have become very close.
Good.
And when they had the 50th anniversary in '83 for the Lone Ranger going on the radio, Fran called me in St. Louis, never going to go up to Arcadia, New York, and said, would you represent the family as the radio expert for my dad's creation? Which I felt extremely flattered by the fact that the author's son was thinking that way. And then, of course, his mother, never gives out interviews. Never.
Fran's widow?
Yeah. She's very quiet. They're very private. And they did for a while after Fran had died.
Has she been to any of the conventions?
And no. And she lives in St. Louis. And she's a very private person. And I've always respected that. I've never contacted her. Even though I only live not even 6-7 miles. So when I went up there, I asked Fran, I says, will there be a chance to sit down and talk with your mom for a few minutes? And he says, oh, yeah. And so he says, I'll talk to her. And she talked to me for about an hour or 2 hours and got a lot of really good little inside information about things. But see, the reason she says that she doesn't is the fact that when Fran came home, the office stayed at the office. She knew nothing of what really was going on, and she didn't know what was going on until she read Osgood's book about how he had been really shortchanged, and that really upset him then.
Fran Stryker was one of the most laid-back guys.
He was not a businessman.
No.
No
Proof
way.
in fact that he didn't take more or get more.
But I found that through this association like this, when that was over, now the Osgoods and the Strikers had been close for years. And they were having, this was a 3-day event, and at the end of that, they were going to have a private family gathering. And I was asked to come to this. They say, we consider you family, you know. And I felt a tremendous amount of gratitude on that and stuff. Yeah, because it's just not somebody who's going to come crashing in, get a few things, and go crashing out. Make a few bucks for myself, and screw anybody else, and off you go, like it so often happens. And I found that over the years, even Parley Bear, who was on Gunsmoke and stuff, I'll call Parley up in California. I'll say, "Wait, why don't you get a hold of, get a hold of Virginia, and gives me Virginia Gregg's number, and Virginia will give me the number of whoever. And there seems to be once you have, I don't know if the right word is proven yourself, that you're anything other than just a good friend or somebody who's definitely part of maybe the family in some degree, you're taken in. That's it. There's no problem. You're not looked at with some sort of a strange, questionable eye or whatever,
How much time we got?
Oh, about another hour.
Oh, we do. Well, we're not going to take that long.
No.
I just want to tell. I told this to John. One of my dearest friends has been for 40-some years. Is more today than he was 2 weeks ago. Mike Wallace. Mike used to be, as we mentioned before, an announcer on the Green Hornet and staff announcer, news and whatever. And later went on to fame, and real fame. One of the finest, if not the finest in the business. His 60 Minutes proves that. But he came into Chicago 3 weeks ago, Friday night, the Knickerbocker Hotel. We received a very prestigious award in broadcast, sponsored by the convention of the Illinois Broadcasters Association, big, powerful organization. Most of them own radio stations, television stations, or part of them, conglomerates, whatever. And I met Mike in the lobby at 6:30, 6:45, cocktail party was 7:30, dinner at 8. And I made a lot of friends there, and with big people. They don't impress me, but and I don't want to be impressed. But Mike wandered into the cocktail party about 7:45, 50 minutes before dinner time. And I spotted him, and I was amazed, no one greeted him at the door. The people who were supposed to be there. And he stood there very laid back and very not self-conscious, not Mike Wallace. As if to say, well, here I am, but I'm not going to intrude on you folks. I saw him and I walked over and I shook his hand and I started introducing him around. Not that he needed an introduction, but I think he was gratified by my doing it. I introduced him to many people during the next 15 or 20 minutes, but I sat at a table with 2 owners of 2 television stations, 1 owner of a radio station, and a couple who I didn't know what they did, who sat across the table I was made the introduction to and didn't talk to them at all during the dinner. Mike accepts the award graciously after the MC gave the floor to him. And he said this, without mentioning anybody's name, because nobody knew in that whole dining room who the hell it was. I usually go right directly into my unprepared speech, but I made a few notes on the plane coming here. I want to talk for a couple of minutes, and I'm sure you won't mind, about a man who's very dear to my heart. A man who used to play as a young man when he and I were young children, first in broadcast, and he was in broadcast way before I was, because he's a hell of a lot older than I am. As a matter of fact, he used to play the part of the rear end of Silver, the Lone Ranger's horse, and then I thought, my God, it's me. But he still hasn't mentioned any names, so nobody knows who the hell he's talking about. And then he goes into all these accolades about this unknown person. Finally, he ends after about 2 minutes, approximately 2 minutes. I want you to know this man has turned into, and he's been one for many years, one of the finest narrators in the whole industry. I'm speaking of none other than my dear, good friend, Ernie Winstanley. Stand up and take a bow. I got a standing ovation, a standing round of applause. So, after the photographers, the news reporters are searching Mike out behind the dais, and this couple who I'd been sitting with at the same table, the guy comes up to me, shakes my hand, says, Ernie, you must be a good friend of Mike's. I said, I am. It's too bad we don't see each other more often. He said, let me ask you. He said, I don't think you know who I am, but I am the professor of broadcast, the head professor of broadcast at Illinois University. I said, that's wonderful. He said, I want to ask you how much you charge me to come to the university at any time you can. It doesn't matter. We'll work around you to speak to my students. An hour, 2 hours, whatever. And it could be a prolonged thing. Weekly, monthly, whatever you desire. How much would you charge me? I said, you hit me with a... it is very hard to answer. I charge a lot of money for my lectures. Lying. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of them. I said, but I teach now part-time at Columbia University, teach broadcast. He said, wonderful. Can you name a figure? I said, I can't name a figure, Ed. Let's do this. Give me your card. Here's mine. Let me call you next Tuesday morning when you get back to the college, which I did. Meantime, I talked to Mike. I talked to some other very important people in broadcast before I called him. And they said, don't do it for less than $500. I said, I can't. I enjoy teaching students, talking to students, counseling them, whatever. God put me on this earth. He gave me a lot of talent. I believe he left me on this earth and brought me back to life to give that talent that he gave me to the young. What more use could you be on this earth than to give to the young? I believe in giving. Anything. I give my life. I would. And it made me see how much Michael Wallace means to me and vice versa. What other man of such high caliber and such talent would say this? He knew that that would mean a great deal to me. He knew when he said, if you want good, you want to hire a good actor or a good narrator, that's him. Unbelievable this man would do this, you know, and I thank him after he says, I don't want you to thank me.
It's always a mark of somebody who is much more compassionate and clearly puts in perspective his own importance versus those around him.
He's mellowed so much. He used to be a hardhead, you know.
Oh yeah, I know, but he's not a I am everything.
No, he's not.
And you people are being supported off me. He's not that kind of a person.
Very controversial, still is.
Oh well, that goes with the turf though.
That's him. That's him.
But no, that's a good mark of somebody who applauds those that helped him too.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
And moves along the line.
Yeah.
Anywho, I guess we're going to get going if we want to go get cleaned up or whatever before the dinner.
Yeah, it's 5 to 5 now, 10 after 5.
10 after 5.
Terry, pleasure, friend.
Oh, my pleasure.
And you, young man. John told me not to call anybody young man because somebody started to badmouth me out there.
Oh.
You are one hell of a photographer.
I'll find out later.
Okay.
I'm going to send you some more shows up there now that I got you.
Now, how long will it take you to finish this reel or video?
Actually, it's finished now as far as,
Yeah, but you got to make copies of it, don't you?
It would take a week or two.
Then what are you going to do? You're going to send it directly to me in Chicago?
I'll send it to you.
Then I'll send it on there. Can you make a copy for John?
We'll make one
Oh,
for
you're
John, and
wonderful.
we'll send John one direct.
Now
Give me your address,
you've got
John,
Terry's
and we'll do it.
card, John. And you
Oh,
gave
wait, I
him,
got your address anyhow, didn't I?
you gave him a card, John?
On a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Oh, before I forget, I have a Green Hornet tape. Guess who the announcer is? And he signs off as Myron.
Field and Farrington?
I have him too. Myron Wallace.
Yeah.
Who is Myron
Well,
Wallace?
I mentioned that.
Mike Wallace.
Yeah.
He was known as
John,
Myron.
why don't you take some
I have a
pictures?
green Sergeant Preston tape, the Challenge of the Yukon. You know, Preston used to go in and see the inspector for orders and whatever. Guess who played the inspector on this one show? You recognize the voice. John Todd.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. John?
Do you know what John Todd's real name is? It's not John Todd.
No.
No, what is it?
Fred McCarthy.
Fred McCarthy,
Good Lord.
Irish, yes.
Yes.
He
No,
changed
nobody
that.
knows that. Nobody
He
knows
changed
that.
that when he trod the boards in Shakespearean plays.
Yeah, because he was a Shakespearean actor.
Did you know
He
that
didn't even start the Lone Ranger until he was in his 50s.
Did you? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Did you know, Terry, that I played in Shakespeare's The Tempest and opposite Shelley Winters?
I didn't know that.
She played Ariel. I played Prince Ferdinand in 1941 at the Institute of Art in Detroit. She had braces on her teeth in those days.
Who
and
did?
She was still as bitchy as she is
Shelley
now.
Winters.
Shelley Winters.
Shelley Winters, yeah. John, why didn't... Huh?
Oh, she was
A little bit.
She was a model originally.
Yeah,
ever
you
seen
know,
pictures of her?
it was a real
She
bitch.
did bathing suit stuff.
You know-
She was a knockout.
You know, who was a real bitch was Barbara Streisand. She got her start at the Caucus Club in Detroit, in the Penobscot building.
I saw
I
his
mean,
tape.
a bitch, boy. John, why don't you take a picture of Terry and I
Oh, sure.
and our good friend
Oh,
here?
yes, would you?
And then,
Oh.
I'll take one of you.
All right.
Take them with both cameras, the Polaroid and mine, John. Please.
Yeah, I got a couple more on this roll.
Oh, great. You got some there? You're going to send me copies of those, aren't you? Oh, great.
I got your card,
Okay, Howard. Yeah, I gave it to you, I'm sure. Yeah. If not, I'll give you another one.
Court mentioned today, you will discover that he has become Jesse Lasky. I don't know how we could have a better Jesse Lasky than Court Benson. Our announcer for today's show and playing some incidental roles was a regular on the WXYZ casts of the Lone Ranger, Green Hornet, Sergeant Preston, and many other shows.